He just wanted a quiet meal, until a stranger slipped him a note that could destroy his entire empire. The restaurant was louder than he remembered. Clinking silverware. Laughter that tried too hard. The faint hiss of meat meeting flame. All of it pressed against the walls of his disguise. An old denim jacket, a trucker's cap pulled low, and a pair of tinted glasses he hoped made him look more like a tired traveler than a man worth billions. Ethan Vale hadn't been called Sir in 3 months. Not since he'd vanished from his glass tower in Manhattan and started his strange pilgrimage across the country. Undercover, anonymous, starving for something money could never buy. He wasn't there for the steak. He was there to remember what being human felt like. The neon sign outside flickered Charlie's Grill House, home of the 12 ounces legend. Inside, the smell of charred ribeye and cheap whiskey clung to the air. He sat at the corner booth, pretending to read a crumpled menu. Nobody looked twice at him. Nobody cared. And that was exactly what he wanted. Until she came over. "Evenin', stranger," said the waitress, her smile bright but her eyes tired. "What'll it be tonight?" Her name tag read Lila. The name hit him somewhere unexpected, like a half-forgotten song. She couldn't have been more than 25, hair tucked into a loose braid, apron slightly smudged, her voice soft but alive. There was something about the way she looked at him. Not like a customer. Not like a billionaire. Just a person. "I'll take the steak," he said, lowering his menu. "Medium rare. And, water's fine." She scribbled the order down with a worn-out pen. "You got it." When she walked away, Ethan exhaled for the first time in minutes. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding his breath. For 3 months, he'd been living in motels, using fake names, eating greasy diner food, and trying to find some truth beneath the empire he'd built. His board thought he was in Switzerland. His assistant thought he was recovering. In truth, he was running from the hollow version of himself he'd become. As he waited, the muted TV above the bar played a news story about corporate layoffs. Vale Industries to cut 8,000 jobs worldwide. He flinched. Even here, his name found him. "Bad news," came a voice. Lila was back, holding a glass of water. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah. Depends who you ask." She gave a small shrug. "World's always bad news for someone, huh?" Then she walked away again. Something in that answer stayed with him. It wasn't cynical, it was honest. Grounded. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he wanted to talk to someone. Maybe even tell the truth. But before he could gather the courage, she returned, balancing the steak plate with the ease of muscle memory. "Here you go," she said, sliding it onto the table. Then, lowering her voice just slightly, she added, "You might want to read the note under the napkin." Ethan blinked. What note? But she was already walking away, tending to another table, pretending like nothing had happened. Heart ticking faster, he lifted the folded napkin. Beneath it was a small piece of paper, torn from a receipt pad. On it, written in rushed, uneven ink. "I know who you are. Please don't react. Just nod if you'll help me." His fork froze mid-air. For a long second, the restaurant sounds blurred into static, the laughter, the sizzling grill, the hum of life going on. She knew. Somehow, despite the fake name, the disguise, the quiet life he'd tried to build, she'd recognized him. And she wanted his help. But with what? He looked up. Lila was at the far counter, pretending to refill a coffee pot, but her eyes flicked toward him, quick, urgent, scared. Not blackmail. Not greed. Fear. Ethan's heart pounded in his throat. He gave the slightest nod. In that moment, he had no idea that a single note in a small-town steakhouse would unravel his entire past, and give him the one thing he never knew he needed, redemption. The steak was still steaming when Ethan finally set the note down. His pulse hadn't slowed. The handwriting, the urgency in it, wasn't something he could ignore. And yet, as he glanced across the restaurant again, all he saw was Lila moving between tables, a faint smile plastered on her face like armor. He forced himself to eat, to blend in. He chewed without tasting, every sense sharpened, every thought chasing questions he couldn't yet answer. Why him? Why tonight? And how could she possibly know? The man who walked away. 3 months ago, Ethan Vale's name had filled headlines for all the wrong reasons. Vale Industries, the tech conglomerate he built from a college dorm room, had been accused of insider trading and unethical labor practices. His CFO was indicted. The media storm was merciless. What no one knew was that Ethan had tried to blow the whistle himself, but his board had turned against him. He'd been forced to resign, take the fall, and disappear. The public saw a ruthless billionaire. The truth was far more complicated. He was a man haunted by the choices that came with power, and the lives trampled beneath his ambition. He'd grown up poor in a two-room apartment in Detroit, his father gone, his mother cleaning houses to keep the lights on. He'd built his empire to escape that life. But now, as he sat in a small-town steakhouse with grease-stained tables and honest laughter in the air, he realized the irony. He'd come full circle, back to where no one cared about stock prices or shareholder votes. Back to where people earned their peace, instead of buying it. Lila's quiet desperation. Lila passed his booth again, balancing a tray with 3 plates, pretending not to glance his way. Ethan noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the small burn mark near her wrist, the way she winced when the kitchen door slammed behind her. She was running on fumes. He thought of the note again. "I know who you are. Please don't react. Just nod if you'll help me." What kind of help could a waitress possibly need from a disgraced billionaire? When his plate was almost empty, she returned with a check. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she set it down. "Dessert? Coffee?" "No thanks," he murmured. "Just the bill." Her gaze met his for a fraction of a second, then darted away. "I get off in 10. Wait by the back door." Before he could reply, she turned and walked off. 10 minutes that lasted a lifetime. Ethan's mind raced. It could be a setup. Someone from the press trying to corner him. Or worse, someone from his former company looking to silence him permanently. He'd been careful about staying off the grid, but careful wasn't foolproof. Still, something about Lila's eyes told him this wasn't manipulation. It was fear, the kind that didn't fake itself. He left a 50 under the check, slipped on his jacket, and quietly walked toward the back of the building. Outside, the night was cool and still. The gravel parking lot stretched into darkness. He leaned against the brick wall, watching his breath turn white in the autumn air. 5 minutes later, the door creaked open. Lila stepped out, hugging her arms for warmth. She looked different now, no smile, no mask. Just exhaustion and something rawer underneath. "You came," she whispered. "I did," Ethan said. "Now tell me, how do you know who I am?" She looked around nervously, as if someone might be watching. "You think your disguise fools people? Maybe in a big city. But this town, people notice things. And I've seen your face before. You helped fund that scholarship program a few years ago. My brother was one of the kids who got it." Ethan blinked. "Your brother?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yeah, Michael. But that's not why I wrote the note." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small folded photograph. "He's missing," she said. "And I think it has something to do with your company." The world seemed to tilt. Ethan stared at the photo, a young man, maybe 22, smiling in a college sweatshirt. Bright eyes. Hopeful. "Michael. I don't understand," he said slowly. "How could your brother's disappearance be connected to me?" Lila swallowed hard. "Because before he went missing, he told me he was working on a secret project for a subsidiary of Vale Industries. Something he wasn't supposed to talk about. He said people were watching him. Then one night, he never came home." Ethan's heart pounded. "What kind of project?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But he left something behind. A flash drive. I didn't know what to do with it. I was scared to go to the police, scared of whoever might have been following him. But when you walked into the diner tonight," her eyes welled with tears, "I thought maybe God was giving me one last chance." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan looked at her, this waitress in a small town, clinging to hope, desperate for answers, and felt something inside him stir. Guilt. Recognition. Maybe even purpose. He'd left his old world behind, but it seemed the ghosts of it had finally come to find him. The night had deepened around them, swallowing the edges of the small-town diner. The hum of neon faded, and only the distant croak of crickets filled the silence. Ethan stared at the small flash drive trembling in Lila's palm, A tiny, ordinary piece of plastic that suddenly felt heavy with consequence. "Where did you get it?" he asked. "From his room," she whispered. "He hid it under the floorboard, beneath his bed. I only found it 2 days after he vanished. I didn't know who else to trust." Ethan hesitated before taking it. The metal was cold against his fingers. His mind, trained by years of corporate warfare, immediately began scanning possibilities. Proprietary data, leaked prototypes, trade secrets. Any of it could have made Michael a target. "What makes you think someone from my company had anything to do with this?" he asked. Lila looked up at him, her eyes glistening beneath the dim porch light. "Because 2 days after he disappeared, men in suits came by the diner asking about him. They didn't show badges. Just asked questions. Where he lived, who his friends were. When I asked who they were, one of them smiled and said, 'You don't want to know.'" Ethan felt the chill run up his spine. He'd heard that kind of arrogance before, from his own boardroom. "Do you still have the drive?" he asked. She nodded. "In my car." She led him across the lot to a dented silver Corolla. The air was damp with the promise of rain. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the drive, wrapped in an old napkin. "I tried plugging it into my brother's laptop," she said, "but it asked for a password. Then the computer froze, and I panicked. I thought someone might be able to trace it." Ethan turned the flash drive over in his hand. A small blue sticker bore a single code, V12 RND. That was it, the mark of one of Vale Industries' secret research divisions. The kind that even the public annual reports didn't mention. The kind where projects had national interest stamped all over them. His jaw tightened. This shouldn't exist outside the company network. "What does it mean?" Lila asked. He met her gaze. "It means your brother stumbled into something he was never supposed to see. A decision that couldn't be undone." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The rational part of him screamed to walk away. He was already living on borrowed anonymity. Digging into this could expose him, drag him back into the same corrupt world he'd escaped. But beneath that fear was another voice, quieter, older, the one that used to guide him before ambition drowned it out. The voice that still remembered why he built his company in the first place. To change lives like Michael's. To make something that mattered. And now, one of those lives was gone, and his own company might be the reason. He took a breath. "Lila, if this drive really connects to one of my divisions, there's a way I can access it. But I'll need to use a secure terminal. Somewhere private." "Where?" "There's a motel off Route 9. I've got a laptop there that can bypass internal encryption." Her eyes widened. "You can actually read it?" "Maybe. If we're careful." She nodded slowly, clutching her jacket against the cold. "Then let's go." The shadows began to move. They drove in silence through the sleeping town, the headlights carving a narrow path through the mist. Ethan could feel Lila's tension beside him, the small tremors in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Halfway to the motel, she spoke. "My brother used to talk about you," she said quietly. "He said you were one of the good ones. That you actually cared about the people working for you." Ethan gave a hollow laugh. He must have read the PR brochure. "No," she said softly. "He believed it. He said you built something worth believing in. That's why he took that internship. He thought Vale Industries was changing the world." Her words hit harder than he expected. He stared at the road, the dark trees flashing by like ghosts. "Maybe once. But somewhere along the line, I stopped recognizing my own reflection." When they reached the motel, Ethan parked in front of room 7, the kind of place where nobody asked names and cash was king. He unlocked the door and ushered her inside. The room was simple, just a desk, a bed, and a lamp that flickered weakly in the corner. He set the laptop down and plugged in the flash drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up with a login prompt, V12 secure node. Authorization required. Ethan's fingers moved on instinct, entering a code he hadn't used in months. The system blinked. Access granted. Lila stepped closer. "What is this?" Ethan's eyes scanned the screen. The files were labeled in cold, clinical precision, Project Halcyon, subject logs, termination protocols, behavioral modifiers. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a financial report. It was human testing data. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What is it?" Lila asked. "You came," she whispered. "I did," Ethan said. "Now tell me, how do you know who I am?" She looked around nervously, as if someone might be watching. "You think your disguise fools people? Maybe in a big city. But this town, people notice things. And I've seen your face before. You helped fund that scholarship program a few years ago. My brother was one of the kids who got it." Ethan blinked. "Your brother?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yeah, Michael. But that's not why I wrote the note." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small folded photograph. "He's missing," she said. "And I think it has something to do with your company." The world seemed to tilt. Ethan stared at the photo, a young man, maybe 22, smiling in a college sweatshirt. Bright eyes. Hopeful. "Michael. I don't understand," he said slowly. "How could your brother's disappearance be connected to me?" Lila swallowed hard. "Because before he went missing, he told me he was working on a secret project for a subsidiary of Vale Industries. Something he wasn't supposed to talk about. He said people were watching him. Then one night, he never came home." Ethan's heart pounded. "What kind of project?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But he left something behind. A flash drive. I didn't know what to do with it. I was scared to go to the police, scared of whoever might have been following him. But when you walked into the diner tonight," her eyes welled with tears, "I thought maybe God was giving me one last chance." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan looked at her, this waitress in a small town, clinging to hope, desperate for answers, and felt something inside him stir. Guilt. Recognition. Maybe even purpose. He'd left his old world behind, but it seemed the ghosts of it had finally come to find him. The night had deepened around them, swallowing the edges of the small-town diner. The hum of neon faded, and only the distant croak of crickets filled the silence. Ethan stared at the small flash drive trembling in Lila's palm, a tiny, ordinary piece of plastic that suddenly felt heavy with consequence. "Where did you get it?" he asked. "From his room," she whispered. "He hid it under the floorboard, beneath his bed. I only found it 2 days after he vanished. I didn't know who else to trust." Ethan hesitated before taking it. The metal was cold against his fingers. His mind, trained by years of corporate warfare, immediately began scanning possibilities. Proprietary data. Leaked prototypes. Trade secrets. Any of it could have made Michael a target. "What makes you think someone from my company had anything to do with this?" he asked. Lila looked up at him, her eyes glistening beneath the dim porch light. "Because 2 days after he disappeared, men in suits came by the diner asking about him. They didn't show badges. Just asked questions. Where he lived, who his friends were. When I asked who they were, one of them smiled and said, 'You don't want to know.'" Ethan felt the chill run up his spine. He'd heard that kind of arrogance before, from his own boardroom. "Do you still have the drive?" he asked. She nodded. "In my car." She led him across the lot to a dented silver Corolla. The air was damp with the promise of rain. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the drive, wrapped in an old napkin. "I tried plugging it into my brother's laptop," she said, "but it asked for a password. Then the computer froze, and I panicked. I thought someone might be able to trace it." Ethan turned the flash drive over in his hand. A small blue sticker bore a single code, V12RND. That was it, the mark of one of Vale Industries' secret research divisions. The kind that even the public annual reports didn't mention. The kind where projects had national interest stamped all over them. His jaw tightened. This shouldn't exist outside the company network. "What does it mean?" Lila asked. He met her gaze. "It means your brother stumbled into something he was never supposed to see. A decision that couldn't be undone." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The rational part of him screamed to walk away. He was already living on borrowed anonymity. Digging into this could expose him, drag him back into the same corrupt world he'd escaped. But beneath that fear was another voice, quieter, older, the one that used to guide him before ambition drowned it out. The voice that still remembered why he built his company in the first place. To change lives like Michael's. To make something that mattered. And now, one of those lives was gone, and his own company might be the reason. He took a breath. Lila, if this drive really connects to one of my divisions, there's a way I can access it. But I'll need to use a secure terminal. Somewhere private. Where? There's a motel off Route 9. I've got a laptop there that can bypass internal encryption. Her eyes widened. You can actually read it? Maybe. If we're careful. She nodded slowly, clutching her jacket against the cold. Then let's go. The shadows begin to move. They drove in silence through the sleeping town, the headlights carving a narrow path through the mist. Ethan could feel Lila's tension beside him, the small tremors in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Halfway to the motel, she spoke. My brother used to talk about you, she said quietly. He said you were one of the good ones. That you actually cared about the people working for you. Ethan gave a hollow laugh. He must have read the PR brochure. No, she said softly. He believed it. He said you built something worth believing in. That's why he took that internship. He thought Vale Industries was changing the world. Her words hit harder than he expected. He stared at the road, the dark trees flashing by like ghosts. Maybe once. But somewhere along the line, I stopped recognizing my own reflection. When they reached the motel, Ethan parked in front of room 7, the kind of place where nobody asked names and cash was king. He unlocked the door and ushered her inside. The room was simple, just a desk, a bed, and a lamp that flickered weakly in the corner. He set the laptop down and plugged in the flash drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up with a login prompt, V12 secure node. Authorization required. Ethan's fingers moved on instinct, entering a code he hadn't used in months. The system blinked. Access granted. Lila stepped closer. What is this? Ethan's eyes scanned the screen. The files were labeled in cold, clinical precision, Project Halcyon, subject logs, termination protocols, behavioral modifiers. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a financial report. It was human testing data. Oh my God, he whispered. What is it? Lila asked. He clicked on one of the logs. A video feed appeared, grainy, time-stamped. Inside a sterile lab, a young man sat strapped to a chair, electrodes wired to his temples. The camera panned close enough for Ethan to see the face. Lila gasped. That's him. That's Michael. Her brother's voice crackled through the speakers. If anyone finds this, they lied. It's not about rehabilitation, it's about control. They're using us. Please, whoever sees this, stop them. The feed cut to static. Ethan froze. The air felt heavy, electric. His heartbeat pounded like gunfire in his ears. They're using us. His company, his creation, was experimenting on people. On Michael. Before he could process the horror of it, Lila's phone buzzed. A text. No name, just a number. She opened it, and her face drained of color. You shouldn't have plugged it in. We know where you are. The laptop went black. The lights flickered. Somewhere outside, a car engine roared to life. Ethan's mind snapped into motion. They traced the signal. We have to move now. Lila grabbed the drive, shaking. Where do we go? He threw open the door, scanning the empty parking lot. Anywhere but here. As they sprinted into the night, tires screeched at the far end of the road, headlights flaring like eyes in the dark, coming straight for them. And just like that, Ethan Vale, the man who wanted to disappear, was dragged back into the heart of the empire he'd tried to bury. Rain came down in sheets as Ethan's car tore down the back road, the headlights slicing through fog like desperate hands searching for light. Lila sat beside him, clutching the flash drive, her knuckles white. They were already watching, Ethan muttered, eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The second we accessed that file, a ping went out. Someone inside the company's cybersecurity division must have been alerted. You mean, someone's tracking us right now? Probably, he said. But they won't expect us to head east. They'll think we're going for the main highway. Where are we going then? Somewhere they can't follow. He didn't tell her that he wasn't sure such a place existed anymore. Ghost protocols. They drove for nearly 2 hours before Ethan pulled into an abandoned rest stop, half swallowed by weeds and silence. He killed the engine and turned toward her. "I need to see what else is on that drive," he said. "But we can't risk using Wi-Fi or anything connected to the grid." Lila nodded. "Then what do we do?" Ethan reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small rugged tablet, military grade, completely offline. "Old habits die hard," he said. "I used this back when I was negotiating with governments that didn't like oversight." Lila gave a faint, almost bewildered smile. "You really were everywhere, weren't you?" He hesitated before replying. "Yeah. And nowhere that mattered." He plugged in the drive. The tablet whirred to life. More files appeared, encrypted, but accessible now through backdoor codes Ethan had written himself years ago. He opened a folder labeled Trial Reports/Phase 3. Dozens of files. All redacted. But in between the blacked-out lines were fragments that made his stomach twist. Phrases like, "Cognitive recalibration successful in 83% of subjects." "Compliance serum requires higher tolerance testing." Subject M. Vale interference noted. Mitigation initiated. Lila frowned. "What does that mean?" Ethan froze. That last line. M. Vale. He scrolled down. The metadata confirmed it. His own signature was embedded in the system. He stared at it, disbelief turning into nausea. "They used my authorization code. Whoever's behind this, they forged my credentials to sign off on human trials." Lila's eyes widened. "So your name's on everything they did." "And that means if this goes public," Ethan whispered, "I'll be the one blamed." Silence filled the car, thick and electric. The rain softened, replaced by the slow rhythm of wind brushing against the windshield. "Who would do that to you?" Lila finally asked. Ethan's face hardened. "I have an idea." The enemy in the mirror. He'd once trusted Adrian Cross, his co-founder and oldest friend. They'd built Vale Industries together from nothing, Adrian with the ruthless business instincts, Ethan with the innovation. But when the scandals broke, Adrian had vanished into the background, untouched. It was Adrian who convinced the board to force Ethan's resignation. Adrian who quietly took control of the experimental research divisions. Adrian who smiled in every news interview as if he'd saved the company from corruption. Now Ethan saw it clearly. Adrian hadn't just saved the company, he'd stolen it. And Michael, Lila's brother, had stumbled onto whatever Adrian was hiding. He looked at her. "Lila, this isn't just about your brother. It's about something much bigger. If Project Halcyon is what I think it is, it could change everything. Mind control, behavioral modification, weaponized obedience." Her breath caught. "Weaponized? Like soldiers?" He nodded grimly. "Or citizens?" A fragile connection. They camped out in the car until dawn, wrapped in an uneasy silence. When morning light bled across the horizon, Ethan stepped outside, the cold air cutting through his exhaustion. For the first time, he let himself really look at Lila, not as a stranger, but as someone whose pain mirrored his own. She stood a few feet away, staring at the flash drive in her hand like it was a ghost. "When I was a kid," she said softly, "Michael used to tell me the world was good. That people like you were proof of that. He believed in heroes. I did too." Ethan's chest tightened. "I stopped believing in heroes a long time ago." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "Then maybe it's time you start again." Something in her tone, something unyielding, cut through his doubt. He'd spent months hiding from his name, his guilt, his mistakes. But now, for the first time, he felt something he hadn't in years: purpose. He turned to her. "We need evidence. If we can find where those videos were recorded, maybe we can prove what they did to your brother." Lila nodded. "Do you know where to start?" Ethan hesitated. "There's a research complex in Chicago, one the company kept off the books. If I'm right, that's where Project Halcyon began. Then that's where we go." He gave her a small, incredulous smile. "You realize this could get us both killed?" Her lips trembled, but she met his gaze steadily. "He's my brother, Ethan. I'd rather die trying to find the truth than live pretending I didn't. Something shifted between them in that moment, something raw and unspoken. Ethan looked away before it could deepen, before the guilt of his name could taint it. He started the engine again. By the time they reached the outskirts of Chicago, they traded the Corolla for an old pickup and left the main roads behind. But no matter how far they drove, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At a gas station off Route 12, he caught a glimpse of a man in a dark suit near the pumps, too polished for the rural setting. When their eyes met, the man turned away, murmuring into an earpiece. Ethan's instincts screamed. "We've been made," he said quietly. Lila's breath hitched. "What do we do?" He grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into his jacket pocket. "We split up. Meet me at the Northbridge docks in 2 hours. If I'm not there, run." "Ethan." "Go." She hesitated, then turned and slipped into the shadows. Ethan walked straight toward the man in the suit. Their eyes met again, cold, assessing. "Mr. Vale," the man said smoothly, his voice calm as steel. "You should have stayed gone." Before Ethan could respond, 2 more figures stepped out from behind the pumps. He smiled grimly. "Guess disappearing isn't one of my strong suits." And as the first punch flew, rain started to fall again, washing the past and future into one violent, inevitable storm. The hum of the lab machines filled the air, low, cold, mechanical. Ethan knelt on the floor, Lila's limp body cradled in his arms. Her skin was pale, her eyes flickering with a strange glassy emptiness of someone half awake, half erased. "Lila," he whispered, shaking her gently. "Stay with me." But her gaze passed through him like fog through light. Behind them, Adrian watched from the control platform, arms crossed, his reflection rippling on the glass. "You see, Ethan," Adrian said calmly, "Halcyon doesn't destroy. It simplifies. She's free from pain, fear, and doubt. Isn't that what you always wanted for people?" Ethan looked up slowly, his voice shaking. "You call this freedom?" Adrian smiled faintly. "You were always a dreamer. Ideal in results." The guards dragged Ethan to his feet and ripped the flash drive from his pocket. Adrian turned it over in his hand, admiring it. "Thank you for bringing my property back," he said. "You saved us a great deal of trouble." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You think this will last? You think the world won't see what you're doing?" "The world sees what it's told," Adrian replied. "That's the beauty of it." He turned toward the nearest terminal. "Secure them in Lab 4. Once the upload completes, erase the source data." The guards hauled Ethan toward the door. He struggled, but they were stronger, well-trained. As they dragged him through the hall, his mind reeled. Flashes of his past, his failures, and the one face that refused to fade, Lila's. The prison of memory. They threw him into a containment chamber, a small concrete room with a single flickering light and a digital lock on the door. The air smelled of antiseptic and dust. He sat there for what felt like hours, head bowed, heart fractured. The weight of it all pressed down like an ocean on his chest. He'd built Vale Industries to change the world, to make life better. And instead, he'd handed the keys of human thought to a madman. Michael was gone. Lila was gone. And Ethan Vale, once the visionary billionaire, now a nameless fugitive, was nothing but a ghost buried under his own inventions. He closed his eyes, whispering into the silence, "You were right, Lila. There are no heroes." For the first time since going undercover, tears found him. Quiet, unrelenting, human. He thought about the things he traded for success, his friends, his conscience, the simple joy of knowing someone cared about him, not his money. He thought about his mother who used to tell him, "If you ever forget who you are, go back to what broke you, and fix it." But how do you fix the world when you're the one who broke it? The voice in the dark. A faint click broke the silence. The door's lock emitted a soft whine. Ethan lifted his head. "Mr. Vale," a low voice whispered from the hallway. "If you want to live, don't make a sound." The door creaked open. A shadowed figure stepped inside, a woman in a lab coat, her ID badge turned backward. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. "Someone who used to believe in Adrian Cross," she said. "My name's Dr. Aaron Malik. I was part of the early Halcyon research team. I thought we were helping people, curing trauma, reducing violence. But then, People started disappearing. Your waitress's brother was one of them. Ethan's heart thudded. Michael Carter. She nodded. Yes. He figured out what Halcyon was really doing, overriding free will. He smuggled the data out before we could stop him. He died trying to warn you. Warn me? Adrian always said you'd come back eventually. Michael believed that if anyone could stop this, it would be you. Ethan's breath caught. Then help me save her. Lila's still in the system. He injected her with something. Dr. Malik's face tightened. The neural compliance serum. Once it binds, it starts rewriting the brain's decision patterns. After an hour, the subject loses all autonomy. How long has it been? She glanced at her watch. 40 minutes. Ethan's pulse spiked. Then we have 20 left. She handed him a keycard. The lab's main control node is down 2 levels. But Adrian's got guards everywhere. You'll need to trigger a manual override. Ethan gripped the card. You're risking everything by helping me. She met his eyes. I helped build this nightmare. The least I can do is help end it. The dead hallways. They crept through the corridors, the hum of machines echoing off sterile walls. Every room they passed was a tomb of glass and silence, pods filled with motionless figures, wires feeding into their skulls. Lila could be next. Ethan's steps grew heavier with each hallway, each flicker of fluorescent light. Finally, they reached the control core. The glass chamber pulsed with the eerie blue glow of the Halcyon mainframe, a tower of cables and servers that seemed to breathe like something alive. This is it, Dr. Malik said. You can either destroy it or use it. Your choice. Ethan stared at the screens flashing with data, brainwave maps, identity strings, compliance algorithms. He realized that if he shut it down, every connected subject might die. But if he left it running, Adrian would win. I need to isolate Lila's signal, he said. Malik nodded, typing furiously. Her ID code should be tagged as H17. There, that's her file. On the screen, a neural scan pulsed in soft blue waves. He could almost see her heartbeat in the data. She's still there, Malik whispered. But barely. Ethan's throat tightened. What happens if I disconnect her manually? You'll have to interface directly. The shock could kill you both. He looked at the scan, the faint rhythm of a mind trapped between obedience and oblivion, and whispered, I don't care. The fall before the rise. Before they could move, alarms exploded through the complex. Red lights flashed. Malik's eyes widened. He knows we're here. Ethan spun toward the door, and froze. Adrian Cross stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. His voice was almost gentle. I warned you, Ethan. You never did know when to quit. You turned her into a puppet, Ethan said, his voice raw. You killed innocent people for your vanity. Adrian smiled. Vanity? No. Vision. He stepped closer. You wanted to change the world. I just finished the job. Ethan lunged forward, but a guard's baton caught him across the back. Pain flared. He fell hard, gasping. Malik tried to reach for the console, but the other guard struck her down. She crumpled to the floor, unmoving. Adrian crouched beside Ethan, his voice a whisper. You can't fight progress. The world doesn't want freedom, it wants comfort. And Halcyon gives it that. Ethan's breath came shallow. You're not saving humanity. You're erasing it. Adrian's eyes gleamed. Maybe that's what humanity needs. Then he stood, nodding to the guards. End it. One raised his weapon. But just before the blow fell, a single thought tore through Ethan's mind. Something his mother had said long ago. If you ever forget who you are, go back to what broke you, and fix it. He remembered the first chip prototype he designed, the failsafe command buried deep in its source code. A command only he knew. As the baton came down, Ethan whispered one word through blood and breath. Override. Somewhere inside the system, a dormant signal stirred. The edge of nothing. Pain flooded him. The room flickered with blue light. Data cascaded across the monitors as his voice activated the long-forgotten master key embedded years ago in the Halcyon code. The guards staggered. Adrian's smug calm cracked for the first time. What did you? Ethan smiled weakly. You built your world on my design, remember? And I built my design to obey one man only. Then darkness swept over him. As he collapsed, he thought he heard Lila's voice, faint and far away, whisper his name. And then, nothing. If you were faced with the choice to destroy everything you built, even if it meant dying for it, would you do it? Darkness. For a moment, that's all there was, thick, endless blackness stretching across what felt like eternity. Ethan's consciousness floated somewhere between life and memory, the edges of reality flickering like an old film reel. He couldn't tell if he was alive or just dreaming his last thought. Then, faintly, he heard her voice. Ethan, don't give up. It wasn't just a sound. It was a thread pulling him back from the void. He opened his eyes. The room around him was still glowing faintly blue from the dying embers of the system overload. Sparks fell from broken panels, the air thick with the metallic sting of ozone. He lay on the floor beside Dr. Malik, who was stirring, groaning in pain but alive. The guards were gone, unconscious or fled. But Adrian was standing across the room, pale and trembling, his control tablet flickering with static. You, Adrian spat, fury cracking through his composure. You triggered an internal failsafe. Ethan coughed, his voice ragged. It's called responsibility. Adrian's fingers flew across the tablet, trying to reassert command, but the screen blinked red. Master key activated. Manual access required. The entire Halcyon network was locked down. Ethan dragged himself upright, every nerve screaming. He looked toward the mainframe and saw one screen still glowing, Lila's neural scan. The waves were chaotic, erratic, fading. She's dying, Malik rasped, crawling to the console. Ethan limped forward. No, she's fighting. He pressed his hand to the glass as if he could reach through it, feel her heartbeat on the other side. The data flickered, and for a brief second, her pulse steadied. He whispered, Lila. I'm here. I'm sorry I let you fall into this. I'm sorry for all of it. But I'm not losing you too. Malik's voice shook. Her neural link is still open. You can reconnect, but if you do, it'll create a feedback loop. It'll burn your mind out before hers resets. He turned toward her, calm, certain. If she doesn't come back, none of this matters. Malik's eyes filled with tears. Ethan. He was already moving toward the core chair, the one Lila had been bound to minutes ago. Into the code. He sat down, strapping the interface band across his temples. The cool metal bit into his skin. He felt the hum of electricity crawl up his neck, the faint smell of burning circuits filling the air. Adrian staggered toward him. Don't be a fool. If you connect manually, you'll kill yourself. Ethan looked up at him, his voice low and steady. Maybe that's the price. Then he pressed enter. A flash of white consumed everything. The real world dissolved, and he was standing in a vast digital expanse of shifting light and shadow, the architecture of the Halcyon network made visible, infinite corridors of code pulsing like veins through glass. Lila, he called out, his voice echoing. No answer. He started walking, the ground beneath him shimmering like liquid silver. With every step, fragments of memory flashed. The diner, her smile, the note under the napkin, her brother's photo. He followed those fragments like breadcrumbs through a storm of data. Then, at the far end of a corridor made of collapsing algorithms, he saw her. Lila stood still, bathed in light, her hair moving in a phantom breeze. But her eyes were blank, her movements mechanical. Lila. She turned toward him slowly, her voice a whisper of static. Ethan, you shouldn't be here. You don't belong in this place, he said, stepping closer. They're trying to erase you. Her head tilted, the programmed voice answering, pain is gone. Fear is gone. I'm free. He shook his head, tears streaking his face. No, that's not freedom. That's the cage he built for you. You told me once, heroes don't run. You made me remember what it means to fight. Now fight, Lila. Fight. For a heartbeat, her expression cracked. Confusion flickered through her features. He took another step closer, reaching out. You once believed people like me could do good. I didn't deserve that faith, but you gave it anyway. You saved me. Let me save you. Her hand trembled. A flicker of color spread across her gray skin, a pulse of life through data. Ethan. He smiled, relief breaking through the pain. That's it. Come back to me. The awakening. Suddenly, the digital world convulsed. Adrian's voice boomed around them, amplified through the network. You can't win. She's part of the system now. You both are. Ethan clenched his fists, shouting into the storm of light. Then we'll burn it down together. He grabbed Lila's hand. Sparks erupted where their palms met, light surging through every strand of code, flooding the system. The endless corridors began to shatter like glass. Ethan. Lila screamed. He looked at her, smiling through tears. Don't let go. She held tighter. Not again. The world exploded in white light. The return. When Ethan opened his eyes, the room was filled with smoke. The power had died. Alarms blared weakly in the distance. He gasped, lungs seizing, and then felt a hand clutch his. Ethan. He turned. Lila was beside him, alive. Her eyes were clear, full of confusion and color and life. He laughed, the sound breaking like something sacred. You're back. She blinked slowly, tears forming. I thought I was gone. You almost were, he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But you came back anyway. Behind them, the halcyon mainframe sputtered and died. The blue light faded to gray. Adrian lay on the floor, dazed, staring at the ruin of his creation. Ethan stood, limping toward him. It's over, Adrian. Adrian's eyes were wild. You think you've won? You destroyed the future. No, Ethan said quietly. I destroyed your illusion of one. He looked around at the dying servers, the quiet hum of defeat. The world doesn't need control. It needs the chance to make its own mistakes. Adrian gave a weak, bitter laugh. You'll see. Chaos will devour it again. Ethan glanced at Lila. Then we'll rebuild it again, the right way. Adrian fell silent, staring at the ruin of everything he'd worshipped. Ethan turned to Lila. We have to go before the place collapses. She nodded, leaning on him for balance. You saved me. He shook his head softly. You saved me first. The light after darkness. They stumbled through the shattered corridors together, past fallen screens and empty pods. Every step was pain, but every breath was proof they were still alive. By the time they reached the exit, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Ethan looked back once at the smoldering facility, the empire he had built, now reduced to ash. For the first time in years, he felt something that resembled peace. When life strips everything away, power, success, certainty, what's left of you that still matters? Share in the comments. What do you think gives someone the strength to rise again after losing it all? The sky bled orange and gray as the smoke rose behind them. The facility burned in the distance, a pyre for everything Ethan Vale once was. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. They reached the tree line where Malik's car was hidden. She was slumped in the driver's seat, pale but breathing. When she saw them, her eyes widened in disbelief. You did it, she whispered. You actually pulled her back. Ethan nodded, exhausted but steady. We shut down Halcyon's main core, but that won't erase everything. Adrian's backups, his investors, the politicians he bought, they'll still come for us. Lila leaned against the hood, still weak but recovering. Then we don't run this time, she said softly. We expose them. Ethan looked at her, something fierce flickering behind his fatigue. You're right. We end this the way it started, with the truth. The broadcast. They drove through the night until they reached the outskirts of Chicago. The rain had stopped, but the city lights shimmered on the horizon like embers in a dying fire. Ethan opened the back of the car, pulling out a weathered case, one of his old prototypes, something he'd kept hidden from even Adrian. Inside was a portable transmitter, capable of overriding any corporate broadcast frequency. Malik stared. That's illegal. Ethan smirked faintly. So is mind control. They set up in an abandoned radio tower on the edge of the city. The wind howled around them as they connected wires and powered up the transmitter. Lila stood by the window, looking out over the skyline. You're really going to tell the world everything? She asked quietly. Ethan's hands hesitated over the keyboard. It's the only way to make it mean something. She stepped closer. You'll lose everything. Again. He met her eyes. Then at least I'll lose it for the right reasons. Lila touched his arm gently. You already have. Something unspoken passed between them, the kind of look that carries more truth than 1,000 words. Then Ethan hit record. The confession. The screen blinked to life. His reflection stared back, unshaven, bruised, but clear-eyed for the first time in years. He began, voice steady but raw. My name is Ethan Vale. Some of you know me as the man who built Vale Industries, the company that promised to connect the world. But what we really built was something darker. A system designed to rewrite the human mind. To make people compliant, obedient, programmable. It was called Project Halcyon. And it's real. He glanced toward Lila, who nodded encouragingly. I didn't know what it had become until too late. But I won't let it continue. I won't let the name Vale stand for silence. Everything you need to expose them is in this transmission. Data, files, names. Spread it. Don't let them bury it again. His hand trembled as he added, quieter. The truth matters more than any empire ever will. He ended the transmission, exhaling as if he'd been holding his breath for years. Malik pressed a few final keys. It's out. Every network, every feed. It's gone global. Ethan sank back into the chair, a weary smile spreading across his face. Then it's done. The confrontation. But as he spoke, a low hum filled the air. Lila froze. Ethan, what is that? A black SUV screeched to a stop outside the tower. The headlights carved through the fog, and armed figures poured out, government suits and private security alike. At their center was Adrian Cross. Somehow, impossibly, he'd survived. He stepped into the tower's entrance, his once polished suit torn and bloodied, but his eyes burning with cold determination. Brilliant, as always, Adrian said, voice echoing off the concrete walls. A confession to the entire world. Pity no one will live to confirm it. Malik reached for the transmitter, but Adrian drew a gun and fired. The bullet shattered the console, sparks flying. Ethan shoved Lila behind him. This ends now, Adrian. Adrian smirked. You always thought this was about saving people. It was never about that. It's about control. Without it, the world tears itself apart. You think your truth will save them? It'll only make them afraid again. Ethan's voice rose, steady and sharp. Fear isn't the enemy. Apathy is. They circled each other amid the smoke and flickering lights. Adrian sneered. You're still chasing redemption. You think one noble act erases the sins of your empire. Ethan's gaze hardened. No, but it's a start. Adrian raised the gun, but Lila stepped out from behind Ethan, holding the transmitter's power core. Looking for this, she said. Adrian turned, fury flashing. Don't. She threw it at the nearest electrical box. The tower roared with light as the circuits overloaded. Electricity crackled through the walls, and every light in the city flickered. Ethan lunged, tackling Adrian. The gun clattered away as the two men hit the floor, fists flying. Adrian struck first, rage twisting his features. You destroyed everything. Ethan blocked the next blow and drove his elbow into Adrian's chest. No, he growled, I saved it. The final punch sent Adrian sprawling backward, hitting the base of the tower. The air shimmered with static. The power surge triggered one last burst of the broadcast, replaying Ethan's confession across every major network in the country, his voice echoing into millions of homes. Adrian stared up at the ceiling, realization dawning as his empire unraveled. You fool, you doomed us all. Ethan stepped closer, breathing hard. No. I gave us a chance. The fall. The tower groaned as the circuits began to melt. Malik shouted from the doorway, We have to go. Ethan grabbed Lila's hand. Come on. Adrian tried to rise, but his legs buckled. He looked at Ethan one last time, a bitter smile twisting his lips. You'll see, old friend. The world will never forgive you. Ethan paused in the doorway, looking back. Maybe not. But she will. He turned and ran as the tower erupted behind them in a blaze of light and fire. They dove into the street as the explosion shattered the sky. For a long moment, the world was nothing but the roar of flame and the taste of ash. Then, silence. After the fire, they stood in the middle of the empty road, watching the smoke rise over the city. Sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with the faint sound of voices, the world waking up to the truth. Ethan turned to Lila. "It's over." She nodded. "For now." He managed a small, tired smile. "That's enough." She took his hand. "What happens next?" He looked up at the horizon, the first rays of dawn cutting through the haze. "We start over," he said. "And this time, we build something honest." The fire had burned through the night. By dawn, all that remained of the halcyon facility and the tower were two pillars of smoke drifting into the rising sun, like ghosts dissolving into light. News anchors were already calling it the Vale revelation. Ethan's confession had gone viral, his face broadcast across every screen, every feed, every nation. Some called him a hero. Others, a criminal who'd exposed too much. But for the first time in years, Ethan Vale didn't care what the world called him. He'd done what was right. The world awakens. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat on a quiet beach outside the city. His beard was a little longer, his skin finally showing the sun again. The world was still reeling, investigations, hearings, resignations, but the machine had finally stopped humming long enough for people to ask questions again. He watched the waves roll in, each one erasing the footprints before it, over and over. Maybe that's what redemption really was, not undoing the past, but letting it wash through you until you could breathe again. Footsteps approached behind him. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. "Figured I'd find you here," Lila said softly. She dropped down beside him, her hair pulled back, her eyes clear and alive. "You disappeared after the interviews." He smiled faintly. Didn't feel right talking about truth from a spotlight. She nudged his shoulder. "You know, people are calling you a modern-day whistleblower. Some are even starting petitions for a pardon." "I don't want one." She blinked. "You don't." He shook his head. "Pardons are for people who still care about their records. I care about the damage we stopped." She studied him for a long moment. "So what now? You just vanish again." He turned to her, the ocean light reflecting in his eyes. "I was thinking of building something new. Small. Honest. No stockholders, no shareholders, just people. Real people, solving real problems." Lila smiled, a slow, genuine curve of her lips. "And where do I fit in that picture?" He grinned. "You'd keep me from losing my mind again." Letters and ghosts. A seagull cried overhead. The wind shifted, carrying salt and silence. Lila reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope, old weathered, sealed in wax. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "It's from Michael." His breath caught. She handed it to him. It was in his apartment. "I couldn't read it before, not until everything was over." He hesitated, then opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged, written in a rush, maybe even fear. "Lila, if you're reading this, it means I failed to stop them myself. But if Ethan Vale ever sees this, tell him something for me. We all make mistakes trying to build heaven. What matters is who we choose to be when we realize we've made hell instead. Don't let him hide forever. People like him, they need people like you. M." Ethan folded the note slowly, his throat tight. "He believed in you," Lila said. He looked at her. "And I almost got him killed." "You didn't," she said quietly. "Adrian did. You saved what Michael started, the truth." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sea kept moving. A second chance. Days became weeks. The investigations led to trials. Governments dismantled Vale Industries piece by piece. Adrian Cross's name filled the headlines for a while, then vanished into the void reserved for the powerful who fall. But Ethan never showed up to any of it. He and Lila disappeared again, not as fugitives, but as people who finally understood that peace doesn't live in boardrooms or laboratories. They settled in a small coastal town, opening a tiny community tech lab. It wasn't glamorous, A few solar panels, some second-hand computers, a garden out back, but it was theirs. Kids came after school to learn coding, mechanics, and storytelling. And sometimes, late at night, Lila would find Ethan out on the porch, staring at the stars with a cup of coffee in hand. "Thinking about the past again," she'd tease. He'd smile. "Thinking about how lucky I am to still have a future." Then she'd lean against him, and they'd sit in the kind of silence that only people who've survived together can share. Forgiveness. One afternoon, months later, a letter arrived. No return address, just a symbol embossed in wax, the Vale Industries logo, now cracked in half. Inside was a single line. "Freedom is chaos. Chaos is life. You win. AC." Ethan read it twice, then tossed it into the fire. Lila watched the flames swallow it, the last ghost of the old world curling into smoke. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Then I wouldn't have found this." He gestured around them, the workshop, the sea, her. She smiled. "Then I guess the world turned out okay after all." He looked out toward the horizon where the sun sank into the ocean, painting everything gold. "No," he said softly. "It's still broken. But it's ours to fix now." The final scene. That night, as the waves whispered below the cliffs, Ethan sat alone by the shore, the same beach where everything had begun to heal. He pulled the note from Lila's first meeting with him, the one she'd slipped under his steak plate. The paper was yellowed, but the words were still clear. "They know what you did. But some things can still be saved." He smiled, folding it carefully before tucking it into his jacket pocket. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Some things were." Behind him, Lila called, "Come inside, dinner's ready." He turned smiling, walking back toward the warm glow of the little house that was finally truly home. Months later, a news report quietly aired. The Vale Foundation announces new global initiative for ethical technology and free education. Founded by anonymous donors, its first project aims to rebuild communities affected by corporate corruption. No one knew who funded it, but a small town by the sea had a brand new tech lab with a plaque on the door. For Michael Carter, who believed the truth was worth dying for. And below it, in tiny letters, EV plus LC. The end. When everything you once built falls apart, what does starting over really mean? Rebuilding your life, or rediscovering yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you risk it all for redemption, or walk away to start anew?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.